Welcome in to the 43rd episode of the Southern Boys Sports Podcast. My name is Drew Hollands, my co-host Ben Clay.
What's going on, guys?
Episode 43. Man, the transfer portal has been an absolute blast to keep up
Active.
with. We've got some 2024 recruiting news. We're taking a look at some first-year head coaches as well here in episode 43, so it should be a fun one. I'm excited to get things underway here on the 43rd episode, Ben, but before we even get started, numero uno things on the list to talk about right now is your week. Let's hear it.
You know, the weeks have basically been the same thing over and over again, where it's baseball, get the school done, play more baseball, get the school done. Seems like we got one more week of that, so I'm ready to win some baseball games this week. We're gonna definitely attempt to win those games, and then finishing up the school week. I actually have a AP exam this week.
Yikers.
For human geography, so that'll be some Thursday.
Yeah.
Did not realize it was this close. So that'll be interesting, but it's just we're coming down to the end of school, so I'm kind of happy about that. But also, there's a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah. Well, hey, if you're listening, watching, whatever you may be doing, wish Ben some luck on this AP exam. So he doesn't have to. I don't know.
It doesn't even. You just fail.
Yeah, you just fail. So worst comes to worst, I guess you could just fail. Anyways, episode 43, like I said, we got first-year head coaches to talk about. We've got some transfer portal news. Transfer portal's been absolutely unbelievable. We're finally getting around to talk about it. The spring games have kind of died down. I know Maryland played their spring game, and a couple group of five schools played theirs as well, but nothing too big to talk about. These first-year head coaches, I want to talk about some guys that we haven't really got to get to their programs a lot with the spring game stuff and all the stuff going on in these big name schools, but we're finally getting to these schools that we've been excited to talk about. And we're excited. But before we start, make sure to go follow our socials at @so_boy_sports on Twitter, at southern_boy_sports pod. 5-star review over on Spotify would really help us out. And like and subscribe on YouTube if you don't mind. Ben, before we jump into episode 43, all the jam-packed content that we've got here for the viewers and listeners, I want to talk about the draft just a tad. We saw Anthony Richardson go to the Colts. We saw Will Levis head to your Titans in the second round. We saw Bryce Young go to the Panthers. It's the first time in the podcast where we've seen the guys that we've talked about go to the draft. We'll see if they succeed and all that good stuff. But I was happy with the draft. I think it went pretty good. I'm not a big believer in any of the quarterbacks who went off the board, to be completely honest with you. I think I like Bryce Young and honestly Hendon Hooker the best out of the quarterbacks. I don't mind C.J. Stroud. I think C.J. Stroud could be a little bit risky. It's really the IQ test that threw me off. I understand it's not that big of a deal, but I haven't seen anyone score that low and be any good. I think he could be a Vince Young type player, somebody of that who was good for like a year and then just kind of fell out of the league. I don't think he'll be terrible. I just don't see him being a star. But the draft, Mel Kiper gets clowned for a living for going out on a limb and predicting things wrong. So I guess you never know with the NFL draft. But college football podcast, we got a lot of stuff to get to here in episode 43. But Ben, your take on the NFL draft?
It was a good one. I kind of enjoyed it because it was a random.
Yep.
It was someone really we hadn't talked about much, or we hadn't seen much. Because all the drafts usually it's like it's certified. But this year kind of different, seeing the Texans trade back up to 3 to get Will Anderson.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson going at 4.
Colts,
not really many people expected these things. I think it was more enjoyable to watch and to see it all play out.
Yeah, Bijan Robinson from Texas heading to the Falcons. A ton of players from Georgia heading over to the Philadelphia Eagles and all that good stuff. Jalen Carter, Keely Ringo as well. Stetson Bennett off the board in the 4th round of the Rams. So a lot of good stuff. A lot of the guys we've been talking about for the past year, and they're headed off to the league. So we got a new group of guys to talk about, and that's kind of the idea of this episode. Talk about the first-year head coaches, a brand new crop of head coaches that we get to talk about in season 2 of the podcast. But Ben, let's start in Auburn, Opelika County. Let's start with the guy we've talked about a good amount. I foreshadowed by saying that we were going to talk about guys that we usually don't get to. We have talked about this team a good amount in the past couple of episodes. I promise those teams that we haven't shown as much love to were coming up. But let's start with Auburn, the Tigers, coming off a 5-7 season. Brian Harsin wasn't the guy. Cadillac Williams stepped in. They got Hugh Freeze now. opening take on Hugh Freeze. I'm going to shoot it over to you, Ben.
I mean, here's the thing. He's trying new stuff, because we talked about their new spring game setup, and that was kind of weird. Recruiting wise, he's doing fine. I think he's doing better than some of the last classes have been, but they've lost some people in the transfer portal. And so that's something that Hugh Freeze needs to find. He needs to find a quarterback. Maybe I've seen Casey Thompson pop up so many times.
Sure.
Things like that. So if they can figure out how to deal with this portal thing, they could maybe have a 500 season and keep on building up. But I think Hugh Freeze, I'm not expecting him to pull a Sonny Dykes year one and be amazing. I'm kind of expecting him to have to try and build back up this program, and I think he's starting it off well.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about Sonny Dykes is it's not like there were certain things about the program that you could predict, right? It's not like you could go in and be like, okay, yeah, they got that one guy at quarterback and they got a bunch of guys out wide. Like, sure, TCU fans and a couple people covering the Big 12, or maybe a couple of those more diehard college football fans, understood that Quentin Johnson was a dog coming into this season, understood that Kendre Miller was going to be a pretty solid all Big 12 running back coming to the season. I think a lot of people didn't see that coming. Max Duggan, no one saw that coming. Max Duggan, I don't think a lot of people saw Max Duggan being a Heisman candidate, if any. So the things that Sonny Dykes did are going to be hard to replicate. The things that Mel Tucker did 2 seasons back at Michigan State in his first season are going to be hard to replicate. So for Auburn, you're losing a guy in Tank Bigsby who was drafted in the 3rd round. Ben, what team was Tank Bigsby drafted by? Do you know?
I should know because I remember looking at this and being like, "Oh yeah, I probably should know that."
Yeah.
Dang it.
A little unofficial trivia. He went to the Jags in the 3rd round behind Travis Etienne and all those guys. So he is a Jag. He's a Jaguar.
I don't like that for him, but okay.
It's rough. But look, Jarquez Hunter is going to be expected to step up. I just saw an Auburn wide receiver hop into the transfer portal. So obviously, you're going to continue to lose guys to the portal. It's just the nature of college football nowadays. But you've got a guy in Robbie Ashford. Like you mentioned, Ben, you're going to be able that wide receiver's name was Landon King, by the way. You're going to be able to snag a transfer quarterback like a Casey Thompson, like a Peyton Thorne who just entered the transfer portal from Michigan State. If you can snag one of those guys, maybe make it a little competition, you push Robbie Ashford to be better. But as of right now, you're stuck with mediocrity at quarterback. Obviously, he came over from Ole Miss, right? He was there from 2012 to 2016. Unfortunately, off-the-field issues were a little bit of a problem. Had 27 wins vacated in 2019. But from 2012 to 2016, he was 7-6, 8-5, 9-4, 10-3, and 5-7. So he's got an above-average winning taste in the SEC. He knows what it's going to take. And I think that Hugh Freeze is going to be a guy who's going to be able to put this Auburn program back on the competitive bowl team map. Am I certain that he's going to take him to a college football playoff appearance or a Sugar Bowl or whatever? I don't know yet. We're going to have to see what he does in year one. But I think right now they're going to be a bowl team, maybe. A 5-7 season wouldn't be the worst thing ever, just because of the portal and how many people you're losing. You lose a couple people to the draft. I want to say 5 players to the draft this past cycle. So look, I'm going to give a best case and a worst case for each coach, and then I'll kick it back over to you for your final 2 cents. Let's start with Hugh Freeze's best case here at Auburn. The best case scenario is he develops his offense into a smart, well-run, fun option scheme, right? You get Robbie Ashford out in space. You're able to get Jarquez Hunter on the option, right? You swing out to him a little bit. You use the receivers as little as you can, right? You give them curl routes, maybe hit him on a couple go balls, do a lot of bubble screens, high-paced, fun offense with a Robbie Ashford guy. You got to take advantage of his mobility, right? You can't just have Robbie Ashford and try and develop him into a pocket passer who's going to hand it off and run that wishbone, hard-nosed offense. It's not Robbie Ashford, and it's not really any of this offense. I think you've got a good enough offensive line, although you did lose Keandre Jones and a couple other guys to the portal this past cycle. You've got enough to block the option. You can run the read option. You can run RPOs and quick hitting, slant, stuff like that. That is being phased out of college football. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right? If you land a guy like Casey Thompson and Peyton Thorne, and if you're listening to this and they already have, maybe things have changed. But when you're looking at a guy like Ashford, you're going to have to get him, Jarquez Hunter, involved. The offensive coordinator and former Tulsa head coach Philip Montgomery is going to come over. he's going to have to be able to mesh well with the guys. You're going to have to get the Tigers in the right direction. You've got a somewhat optimal schedule, in order to maybe, put you in a scenario to go in 8-4 or 9-3. And again, this is best case scenario. So if all things go right, you really get this rolling. Maybe you go out and you beat an Alabama in a shocker or something like that. Is it likely? Absolutely not. Maybe it could happen if they're rolling at the right time, but I guess you never know. Ben, I'll give you your 2 cents before I get to my worst case scenario.
Yeah, I kind of agree because here's the thing. I feel like the difference between Freeze and Harson is that I think Freeze kind of understands what he's working with. And I think he knows that these guys, he can't expect them to come out here and have one player win the game for him. It's got to be a whole effort, and he's got to use all the pieces he has to win a game. So I think if he's able to figure out how to do that correctly and, if they don't get a quarterback Ashford the pieces and just set him up well to have a good game, then they can definitely win games. But if Hugh Freeze is able to manipulate and use these guys well, then I think they could be a decent ball team.
Yeah. A quick look at their schedule. They got UMass, then at Cal. They come home versus Samford, then go to Kyle Field to take on Texas A&M. Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, and then Mississippi State, Vandy, Arkansas, New Mexico State, and Alabama. So rough stretch with Georgia, LSU, and Ole Miss. Obviously, that tough game with Alabama, Arkansas, that rivalry game, somewhat of a rivalry game, should be fun. Ben, let me get to my worst case scenario. I'm going to break it down for you. Worst case scenario for Auburn this season. If you're an Auburn fan, listen closely. Ashford takes a step back this season or stays the same, honestly. If Robbie Ashford gets no better, this team gets no better. He's gonna have to develop under a new scheme, a new offensive scheme under Philip Montgomery and Hugh Freeze. If he doesn't, they're not going to be as good. The poor wide receiver room proves to be a huge issue, and both sides of the ball lack depth and struggle. If this continues to happen, if a lack of depth in a poor wide receiver room, and those two things combined, a lack of depth in the wide receiver room, prove to be a problem, then it's going to be bad, right? And I don't know really what Philip Montgomery is going to try and do at Auburn. Obviously, he had his ways at Tulsa, and I don't know exactly, I wasn't a well-versed Tulsa Golden Hurricane film dissector, so I couldn't tell you. But an early loss to Cal and a close call to FCS team Sanford could set the tone for Auburn as they finish 4-8 or 3-9. Opelika County questions Hugh Freeze. So you go out, and the worst case scenario would be to beat UMass in week 1, then you lose to Cal on the road, then you come back and you play a close game versus Sanford, and it's like, what are we doing? Then you got A&M, Georgia, LSU, and Ole Miss. That would be terrible. That would be the worst case scenario because that could be a serious, an actual 1-5 stretch. And then you're battling back. You have to win 5 straight games to even be bowl eligible. 5 out of the last 6, I should say. So Auburn's going to have to come in. They're going to have to be able to compete with these SEC opponents. And it's the SEC, right? You're not going to get a lot of softballs, right? You get Vanderbilt, but they're not terrible. You get another first-year head coach team in Mississippi State, who unfortunately we're not going to talk about, but they're fun under new coach Zach Arnett. Rest in peace, Mike Leach. You get basically a free win, what should be a free win in New Mexico State, but you're going to have to prove you can play with the above-average college football teams, an Arkansas, an Ole Miss, a Mississippi State, and if you're unable to do that, there might be 3 wins in this schedule. So we're going to have to see. Hugh Freeze seemed to be, it seemed to be going in the right direction. Obviously, the spring game was kind of sloppy. It was raining, but Robbie Ashford ran into touchdown. Checking in on Hugh Freeze right now. I think he looks good. He's working in the right direction. If he can get a portal QB who can come in and produce now, I think he'll be sitting even prettier. And again, we're recording Sunday night, April 30th. So if he lands somebody when you're listening May 2nd or 3rd, then I think he's taking a step in the right direction. But we will see. Ben, let's go to the Big Ten. Let's go to the Big Ten, and it's a guy named Luke Fickell. It's a guy named Luke Fickell who brings in a transfer quarterback from a team you're familiar with, Ben. It's the Oklahoma Sooners. He made a pit stop in between Wisconsin and Oklahoma, and that's SMU. I'm talking about Tanner Mordecai. Luke Fickell gets Tanner Mordecai. He gets, Nick Evers, who transfers in from Oklahoma, right? He's coming from Cincinnati. He produced tons of NFL talent, a guy like Sauce Gardner, Desmond Ridder, Josiah DeGuara. He took UC to first college football playoff appearance and made Cincinnati a perennial group of 5 powerhouse, right? I don't think that should be swept under the rug. I think what he did at Cincinnati and how he was able to compete in the American Athletic Conference is definitely something to take note of. Cincinnati wasn't a Big 12 team like they are now when he was there, obviously, but he puts himself in the position to be competitive in the Big Ten. Luckily for Wisconsin, they get to play in the Big Ten West. So you're competing with the Illinois, the Purdue, the Minnesotas of the world. You're not having to go through Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State in the regular season to try and make that Big Ten championship game, right? It's a down year in the Big Ten West. The door's going to be open for Luke Fickell to go out and beat a subpar Illinois team without Chase Brown, who just went to the draft. He was the backbone of that team. You're going to be without a Purdue team who just lost their head coach and their starting quarterback. You're going to be able to take the bull by the horns this season and kind of steer it wherever you want. The door's wide open looking at the schedule. I'll give you your thoughts on Luke Fickell, and then I got a couple more points here, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming into a team where they didn't live up to the expectations last year. Everyone was expecting them to be a very high team, and they really struggled. But I think that this team, Luke Fickell knows what he's doing. No one expected that Cincinnati team to. No one expected Cincinnati to ever be a contender.
Yeah.
But I mean, he brought that team places where they no one expected them to be. So he knows what he can do, and I think players know what he can do. So I think they're excited to play for him, which I think is good as a coach because it seemed like all those players at Cincinnati he was able to develop and make them really good players. And so I think they're excited to play under him. Nick Evers, I knew him. Tanner Mordecai, I knew him. They're both great players. And I think they both can produce as a good quarterback. They're a good team, and I think they have the good talent. But it's Luke Fickell. I hope he can help develop these players and make them into a winning ball team because it's their year. If you really think about it, it's their year to get something done. So we'll see if he can do it.
Yeah, for sure. I like what they're working with. Like I said, you're competing against Purdue, Minnesota. The door's wide open, right? You bring in Tanner Mordecai, who threw for 3,500 yards, 33 touchdowns, 10 picks, top 25 in yardage in the country. He's actually 18th, right? So he's in the position to take a step up to that Power 5 level, prove himself as a Power 5 quarterback. We didn't see him a lot, obviously, at Oklahoma, a pretty stacked quarterback room with Caleb Williams, a Heisman winner, Spencer Rattler, an SEC starting quarterback. He was kind of mushed down, but always got the opportunity. He didn't have a great spring game from what I've seen. It kind of lackluster at that. So they bring in a redshirt freshman transfer from Oklahoma, Nick Evers. He was a 4-star at a high school, really well-built guy. He could cause a little bit of conflict in the quarterback room. But I like Tanner Mordecai. I know a couple Wisconsin fans were criticizing him. But that being said, I think you're set with Tanner Mordecai. I think Luke Fickell brings in a pretty good coaching staff around him to be set up for year one. We'll see what they can do on defense, right? That's one of the question marks that is always around a team. And it hasn't been in the past because they've got a good defensive coordinator in Paul Chryst. They had Jim Leonard, obviously, before Luke Fickell got here. Paul Chryst was kind of at the helm for Wisconsin there. But they were seen to run a 2-4-5, which is kind of weird. You don't really see that a lot in college football, but that's what they ran in their spring game. You bring in an all AAC first team transfer in Darian Varner from Temple. They've got a lot of group of 5 guys looking to make the step up to the Power 5 level. I think a lot of people are bought into what Luke Fickell's doing, right? He was able to develop group of 5 talent, send it off to the NFL. And I think he's trying to do that now. You got a group of 5 transfer quarterback. You got a couple group of 5 transfers on the defensive side of the football. And with a guy like Braylon Allen in the backfield with a solid offensive line, with a hard-nosed Big Ten football team, I think Luke Fickell, what he did last year, showing up for the bowl game, a guaranteed rate bowl game against Oklahoma State, early to late December. He showed up for that and wasn't hands-on, but he was there. He was getting himself familiar with the program, and I think he's done an excellent job building what he's got so far. So I'm excited for Luke Fickell. Unfortunately, we haven't really been able to talk about the Badgers as much as I would like to, but we're going to definitely keep an eye on them throughout the summer and the spring. Ben, I'll give you my best case scenario for Wisconsin. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Fickell brings success to this level. Tanner Mordecai and Braylon Allen find their stride together. The Badgers are able to win a shaky Big Ten West, and Fickell looks like a hero in year number 1. Depending on the Badgers' talent and team chemistry, the schedule allows for a 10-2, 9-3 type of season. Now, the ceiling is so low in the Big Ten West that you could, quite frankly, go like Purdue did, 8-4, and have a good enough Big Ten record to go in and win it. So you're put in the position to succeed year one if you're Luke Fickell, and you're put in the position not only to succeed in year one, but to succeed down the line. You're in such a weak division, and obviously this will get shaken up a little bit probably once USC and UCLA come over to the Big Ten. But you've got a pretty favorable opening 3 games. You have home against Buffalo and Georgia Southern, and then you travel to Pullman, Washington to take on Washington State. Then you got Purdue, Rutgers, Iowa, Illinois. Then you go Ohio State. But then you have Indiana, Northwestern, Nebraska, and Minnesota to end off the season. If this team finds their stride, I mean, I honestly could find maybe 2 losses in there. You got Ohio State that I would consider a loss. You got sneaky teams like Iowa, maybe a Minnesota or Nebraska goes in and beats them. But I like what Fickell's got. I think he's set it for success. And I think the Big Ten may be on the lookout for a team like Wisconsin. Now, let me give you the worst case. Tanner Mordecai and other Group of 5 transfers are not able to adjust. Evers and Mordecai are a revolving door at QB, and Braylon Allen is forced to be the workhorse. The defense isn't as good as expected, and the Badgers drop a few weird games. Fickell finishes 6-6 to 8-4. Badger fans are patient. I don't think this is a situation where if he goes out and goes 7-5 in year one, people are going to be livid. I think Badger fans do expect good seasons, and I think that they get a little frustrated when people don't bring it to them. But I think they've been at the level where they go 8-4, 7-5, 9-3, maybe 10-2 under Paul Chryst. They're used to it. Anything above that would be great, right? I find it hard to believe that Fickell doesn't develop these guys. He seemed to be a great talent developer over at Cincinnati. He seemed to be a guy that really understood the X's and O's, and that's why he was able to go out and win 13 games in a season and not lose 3-4 games, right? I think that's why multiple Power 5 programs had their eye on him, and I think that's why you should have your eye on him this year at Nebraska. So that's our second first-year head coach, Ben. Any closing thoughts on the Badgers and Luke Fickell?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been saying his first year. This is a very important year for him because it's the year to look great and have people start looking at you as a program that, I think I do want to go to Wisconsin and things like that. So I mean, if they can make the Big Ten championship this year, in that weak Big Ten West, I think they could definitely get some players, and I think it would work out perfectly for him.
Yeah. And like you said, like I've said, I don't think they've got to be a top 3 team in the Big Ten to even make the conference championship, right? I mean, you don't have Penn State or Michigan on your schedule. All you have to do is play Ohio State. You'll probably lose. Honestly, you're just going to be out-talented, but who knows, because that quarterback room's a little shaky as of now. You're set up for success with this schedule and with the division. So good pull for Wisconsin, I guess you could say. Ben, let's get to a team that I think everyone and their mom and their mom's mom and their mom's mom's mom has been talking about this spring. And if you know what I'm talking about Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes, a team we will, like I said, talk about later in this episode when we get to the transfer portal talks. But Deion, they've been in the news a lot. Over 50 players entered the transfer portal for them, which is just honestly astonishing. I think this team could be pretty good, right? Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, and multiple other Jackson State transfers, they could make this team solid. I think, that being said, Ben, tell me if you agree. I think they're being disgustingly overrated this season, and I think that could play to bite every single player on their roster and Deion Sanders himself right in the butt, right? I think it could. I think they're being overrated this season. I could be proven wrong. This could get clipped later in the future, and who knows? But I want to get your take. Overrated or what, Ben?
So, in my opinion, I don't feel as though they're overrated, but that they're overhyped.
Okay.
Because I feel as though,
that was inspirational. I'm not going to lie. That was some great wordage right there, and that's kind of exactly what I meant. So,
because I haven't heard people be like, they are a national championship team, but I have heard them be like, this team has 4 of the greatest college football players in Colorado history, something like that. And it's like, Shedeur Sanders, great player, Heisman candidate. Let's calm down a bit,
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think they have good players. I for sure think they have good players, and I think Deion Sanders could help turn them into great players. But I think this year, first year, they're all playing together for the first time. Not all of the transfers and classes have came in. And they've lost a lot of people.
Yeah.
So if they don't, I don't think right now they have the depth for a amazing year. But I think Dion is setting them up to have depth for amazing years in the future.
Yeah. And I mean, if you tuned into the national media, I listened to JD PicKell's podcast weekly, does a great job over there. I listened to Pat McAfee this past week just because Deion Sanders was on there, wanted to hear what he's got to say. And he basically just admitted to cutting players and saying, we don't want you here. You're, go find somewhere else in the portal, whatever. Technically, I guess not illegal. I'm not really familiar with the ins and outs of the NCAA rulebook, so I couldn't tell you. Sounds illegal, but with everything going on now, I don't really know if there's a specific rule against telling someone to enter the transfer portal. Maybe I'll read up on the rulebook, but I think Deion Sanders is going about it like he's running an NFL team.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. 18-year-olds aren't going to be able to just go in with whoever and go out and just ball, right? The best players and the best duos, you're talking about a team like Joe Burrow, Terrace Marshall, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Those dudes really, really, really got along. They really liked each other. They really bought in to each other's game. They got along off the field. If you bring in the 53 best players in college football and you put them on a team and they had to play one game together and they didn't really get to be familiar with each other and you just made them bond over one summer and made them go out there and play a football season, it's going to be tough, right? 18 to 23-year-olds are still pretty much kids, younger men. And I don't think going out there and treating them like they're 36-year-old men who are on contracts is the best idea. You can't just cut somebody and bring in another player from Arkansas who had a pretty good season or Alabama or Ole Miss and just expect them to get along with Shadur right off the bat or get along with the DC right off the bat. You got to allow a team to grow together. I think being a part at any level, whether you're part of a high school team, a college team, getting to know the guys around you, getting to know somebody over a year period can make a team 3 to 4 wins better. If you understand what the person's going to do, if it's just an improv play where you're scrambling out of the pocket and Travis Hunter is going to go left and come back right and you're going to be able to hit him, that makes the team better than if you throw the ball and the dude cuts up the field because he just transferred from Kentucky and you barely know him, right? The personalities are coming to play here. It's 18-year-old kids. You can't just toss them around like they're free agents. I think that's what Deion's doing wrong. Now, I could be wrong on this. I'm not friends with Colorado players, so I don't know, right? He's got the 46th recruiting class in the 2024 class. He's got a top 5 portal class, and he should be able to recruit well with his namesake, with the NIL that he's been able to do. I talked about it in episode 42. He doesn't have to come out and be the greatest X's and O's coach of all time, right? He doesn't. So I think what he's got is fine. He's got a 5-year, $29.5 million contract, so he's sitting prettier than I am. And, we'll see what Deion can do. Ben, best case scenario for Coach Prime. Him and Sean Lewis have one of the best and most explosive offenses in college football. Colorado becomes a super fun team to watch, and they don't rely on their bad defense at all. They rack up some key wins. An 8-4, 9-3 season would be a serious, serious best case for Colorado. They've got to play USC, UCLA, Oregon State, and Utah, and Oregon. So 5 of the tougher teams, if not the best 5 teams in the conference. It's going to be tough for an inexperienced and prove it team in Colorado to go out and win those games. Am I mistaken on that take, Ben?
No, I mean, and you've been saying it the whole time. It takes time. Things take time. And I feel as though we have seen Shadur and Travis, some players like that who came over from Texas State, they do have a connection in someone like that. But I think it comes down to whether these new players, these players with new teams, you have no idea how, like you were saying, you have no idea how some of these players play,
Yeah.
You have no idea how Shadur likes to handle the pocket and things like that. And so it takes time, you don't see – you had to see Joe Burrow, that whole offense was basically seniors by the end of it, all 26 players on their – or like all 11 players on their offense got drafted. Their whole team got drafted.
Yeah.
So it takes time, and which is something why I'm saying this year they're looking for 8-9 season. But in the future, when Dion can get his depth and they can all come together and they have that time, I think they could be good. But I think this year we just need to come back a bit more down to earth and just hope that they can bond well this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest misconception in the media right now or among Colorado fans, whatever. If you go 5-7, like I don't really know if you understand how big of a step up that is from a 1-11 team that was the worst team in college football, FBS last year. That's a huge step up. Right, that's a huge step up. If you go 5-7, 6-6, and develop your players in the right direction, you make a bowl game in year one. You don't have to win 9 games, right? You don't have to. And I think the Buffalo fans are going to be a little upset if they win 5, 6 games, whatever. Give Dion some time to get those players in, develop those players. And if he doesn't clean house again next year, then maybe we'll get to see these players develop as one. Now, let's get to the dreaded worst case scenario. The team still has questions on defense and lacks consistent star power on offense. Shadur struggles out of the gate, and both sides of the ball look bad. Nebraska, TCU, and Oregon out of the gate are too tough to handle, and CU goes 4-8 in Prime's first year. Very possible. Nebraska, TCU, and Oregon out of the gate, plus Colorado State in a rivalry game, are not gimme games at all, Ben.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like the difference is, though, a Nebraska team right now is very similar. You know, they have had little time to bond, and I feel as though bringing in Jeff Sims as quarterback, Casey Thompson's in who's a portal, they're pretty similar in that situation. And I would have to I think that they can beat Nebraska, seeing as how they're same situation, but Colorado has, I would say, better players. But I think Oregon and TCU are games that you might be a bit unprepared for that one. You know, you're like, oh, they lost Max Duggan, lost Kendra Miller, lost Quentin Johnson, lost everybody.
Yeah.
They're not going to be as good. TCU, Sonny Dykes, I feel like Sonny Dykes worked perfectly with what he had last year, and I think he can do that again this year. So I think they have to play the game smart and don't take anything for advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that this team, it just feels like Nebraska or a team like I'm trying to think of it, an Auburn maybe. They return so many guys that it just feels like you're kind of a well put together. I'm going to buy in. We're going to give it all we got this season. We're all built in, and it just feels like Colorado's trying to put together like an all-star team. They're just grabbing the best players and saying, let's play, man. We're going for a national championship this year. Well, hey, let's play, man. We got the best players in college football. And I think that works to an extent. And I think with the NIL, that is kind of pushed, right? That's what you want.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that Dion, that's something new in college football that we haven't seen. He's trying it out. He's going to be the trial. And if it doesn't work out, then people will know. Don't ever do that again. But if it works, then you got a new type of college football, and Deion Sanders is the trailblazer for it. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited for Dion this year and Coach Prime. I know that a lot of people aren't liking him. I'm rooting for him. I just don't know how far they can really go. Let's go to Louisville. Ben, let's go to Louisville, a team we were really high on heading into the 2022 season last year with Malik Cunningham and all those guys. You know who Malik Cunningham went to as an undrafted free agent, Ben? Our guy.
And if he went somewhere, I'm happy for him.
He's a Patriot. He's a Patriot.
Does he take the job?
Yes.
I mean, I guess he did. He signed, but would you rather go undrafted and be on the Patriots practice squad, or start on a team in the USFL?
That's a great question. I'd probably just want to get the NFL experience. I mean, I'd probably rather be a Patriot. I mean, getting to play for Bill Belichick, getting to be in New England, like get to be around all those NFL players, like it'd probably just be a fun experience. If it doesn't work out, go over to the USFL maybe or something like that. But yeah, I mean, you got to sign it. The money probably much better too, if I had to guess. So I'd put
as a practice squad quarterback.
Well, I don't know if he's going to be practice squad though. I mean, you just sign him as an undrafted free agent, and then you get sorted later on. So I don't know. I don't really know how the salary works in the NFL. I'm not really well versed on that. More of a college guy. But clearly. Jeff Brome without Malik Cunningham this season. He's got Jack Plummer. They worked together at Purdue before Plummer transferred to Cal last season. Brome at Purdue, 36-34 overall. He made 3 bowl games. And he comes back home, right? He was born in Louisville, played college football here, and he was an assistant here from 2003 to 2008. So he's got the experience. He understands the Louisville program. He's back with that Louisville Cardinal. He's back in his kind of his home, his biome, his environment. And I think that's check the box, right? That's a great start for Jeff Brom, right? He's back in his natural habitat, you could call it, and I think that's great. He brings in his brother Brian to coach the quarterbacks and the offensive coordinator and take the offensive coordinator job. Brian played 7 years, NFL, CFL, worked with him at Purdue. They've got a great connection. So I think it's almost like a hometown family game at Louisville is kind of the feeling over there. I think they've got the pieces to be a pretty good team. I think Jeff Brom is going to be exciting. We saw kind of his max potential at Purdue, although we did take him to the Big Ten championship game before getting absolutely slaughtered by LSU in the Cheez-It Bowl last year. That was a weird one. But Ben, your takes? Elville, they've got their new coach.
Yeah, I mean, he was a good coach, and he was able to bring a Purdue team in that weird Big Ten West conference to a Big Ten West championship game. So in terms of what he can do with the team, with what he has, I mean, he wins the games he has to, I guess. I mean, besides the Big Ten championship, but to make it places, he was able to win those games. So far, he's brought in a good recruiting class. I mean, I think he's setting himself up for a good future, and as long as he's able to develop players, like, I mean, Aiden O'Connell, when he came into Purdue, was not seen as a great quarterback, but he was just drafted. So, I mean, if he can keep on doing that with players at Louisville, I think he can set them up well and keep this development working.
Yeah, I mean, he produced a guy like Rondale Moore, who's now with the Cardinals. He was an explosive threat in college. Just produced another NFL wide receiver in Charlie Jones, who went third or fourth round, I believe. So he's producing those guys on the offensive side of the ball. They've always got a solid defense. We'll see what he can do there. But Jack Plummer's going to be QB1. Brock Doman is going to be probably QB2 maybe. We'll see what they do. I know Louisville spring game was a week or two back. Just didn't have time to fit him in the episode. But Plummer in 2022, 3,095 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 9 picks. So he was a plus quarterback at Cal. Obviously, he was in a rough situation because Cal's just bad at football at this point in time. But I like what Louisville's got. I'm going to ring off my best and worst case scenarios right here. Best case scenario for Louisville and Jeff Brom in year one is Brom takes advantage of a somewhat weak ACC. Louisville starts off hot against Georgia Tech in the Chick-fil-A kickoff event, and Jack Plummer and company look good on offense. Cards are solid enough on defense to win games, and Louisville goes 9-3 and makes a solid bowl game in year one under Jeff Brom. Now, you might be saying, Drew, 9-3 for Louisville is honestly just brain dead. They're never going to do that. Whatever. Number one, I'm not saying they're going to go 9-3. I'm saying that is their ceiling. Number two is they start with Georgia Tech in the Chick-fil-A kickoff game, who's right now a dumpster fire. Jeff Sims leaves them. They've got a couple. I mean, it's just wild over there. Then they got Murray State, an in-state game, I guess you could say. That should be a win over an FCS program. If it's not a win, then we're really in for a bad season. Then you got Indiana. Then you got Boston College, 2 winnable games, right? Then you got NC State, probably a loss. Notre Dame and Pitt, probably a loss. But then you got Duke, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Miami, and Kentucky. So it's going to be a mid-season. Best case scenario, you go 9-3, but you can definitely see some losses in there for Louisville. Worst case scenario, Brock Doman is up for QB1 after Plummer starts poorly, and some inconsistencies start to come for Louisville. After losing key defenders up front, the Cards are an easy team to beat. Louisville loses some stinky games and goes 3-9 to 4-8, and Brom is close to the hot seat after year one. I think there's definitely a middle ground, and I think they'll find that middle ground. The goal for Brom in year one should be a bowl game. I think they need to get back there. Yeah. They played Cincinnati in the Fenway Bowl last year, and he needs to find a way back there. I think you can find wins over a Boston College, Indiana, Murray State, Georgia Tech. You go through a rough patch in the middle of the season, but then you got Virginia Tech, Virginia, Miami, and Kentucky, both somewhat weak. There's wins in there. There's 6 wins, 7 wins in there. I think that's what Brom should be shooting for. But Ben, your last 2 cents right here out of Louisville.
No, I agree with that. I think I would agree with the middle ground. You coming off of a bowl game season, you definitely still want to put this team in a bowl game as a first-year head coach. And I mean, like what I've been saying, you just want to look for development. First year, first year with these guys, you just want to see them get better, and that's something we've been talking about. On the baseball team, where it's not like every day you just want to get better.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of it, in the next few years, this team could get better and get good enough to have a 10-win, 9-win season.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing great in the recruiting trail. I think they're top 25 recruiting class in 2024 right now. Obviously, we'll get to that those recruiting rankings a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, I think what Jeff Brom's doing, they're going to have to take a step in the right direction. They're going to have to stay at that. If they drop off from 6-6 to like 4-8, 3-9, I think you're kind of in for a tough one. But I think you win a couple more games, you go plus 7-6, maybe 6-7. I think you're in a position to be just fine. You bring in those recruits. They got a couple 4-stars coming in. I think they'll be fine. Let's go back to the Pac-12, Ben, our last first-year head coach that we want to talk about, the youngest head coach at the FBS level right now. That is Kenny Dillingham, only 33 years of age. Dillingham comes over from Oregon. He was the OC there. He also worked with Mike Norvell at Memphis and Florida State. Now, the biggest, most important thing about this is he coached some great quarterbacks. That's Bo Nix. That's Jordan Travis, as he was the OC at FSU, and then he was both at Auburn and Oregon with Bo Nix. So he's worked closely with Mike Norvell, who's solidified himself as a pretty good college football coach. He's young, but he's worked with some great coaches. He's built himself a pretty good resume coming into this season. And he's taken over a Sun Devil team who's terrible, right? Herm Edwards did not do him any favors going 3-9. Herm Edwards was fired on the field. They've been a dumpster fire in the FBS and in the Pac-12 lately, Ben. So they're going to have to find their stride now. They have got a very fun and exciting quarterback room that contains true freshman Jaden Rashada, who bounced around from Miami. Am I going to go to Florida for the NIL? He ends up at Arizona State with a pretty big NIL. They bring in Notre Dame transfer Drew Pine. After they bring in him. They had Emory Jones, who transferred out to Cincinnati, and then they returned Trenton Bourguet, who saw some reps last season, some starting reps and all that. Now, they have got a very interesting quarterback room. They've got a solid defense. They've got what it takes to be maybe a bowl team, right? Maybe. I'm excited to see what Kenny Dillingham can do in year one. I'm a big believer in him. I'm going to be definitely rooting for Arizona State. I'll open up the floor for you. I got a couple points, best and worst case. Then we'll hop right to our 2024 recruiting talks in episode 43, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they didn't have the greatest of seasons last year, but I think he's been known. He's been a good offensive coordinator, and I think he has a good weapons on offense. So I think this team could definitely have a step up, and I think getting Kenny Dillingham is a step up for this team. So I'm excited to see what they do. Rashada with him as the head coach could develop well. So I'm excited to see what this team does. This first year, they do have pieces, so I think bowl eligible is probably like 6 wins is probably really what they're looking for. 6-7 wins is what they're looking for. I hope they can get that. But it's a team where they have a good recruiting class, pretty good recruiting class. It's on the trend upwards. So I'm excited to see what he does, and I think this is a good signing for the Arizona State program.
Yeah, for sure. And the tough thing about being in the Pac-12 is when the Pac-12 is really pretty solid, it's tough if you're a team trying to work up, because there's only 10 to 12 teams, I think. So you're in the position where it's dog eat dog in the Pac-12. There's not 14, 15 teams like the SEC or the ACC where there's divisions and you can kind of work your way. Like you've got to be good. Like you got to be able to compete with the big dogs like Oregon, USC, and all that good stuff. But at offensive coordinator, Dillingham brings in FCS head coach Bo Baldwin from Cal Poly. So he should be interesting. I think Dillingham's really offensively minded, and he's really good at what he does. At DC, none were listed on the Arizona State website, so question marks there, I guess you could say. But yeah, I mean, this team, best case scenario, Dillingham finds his guy at quarterback. I think that's Rashada. I think you've got to go with a freshman, try and get him into the offense. But they've got one of the best looking offenses in the country. He develops Rashada into a dog, and is seen as one of the better coaches in college football. ASU overachieves and goes 9-3 in year one. Arizona State is seen as one of the more fun teams in college football. Everything is there, Ben. The quarterback, the big man on campus quarterback, the true freshman goes out, kills it. You got the youngest coach in college football. You got really exciting, bright jerseys. You're in Tempe. It's a party school. Everything's rolling. You got a fun offense. If they get all this going, I'm here for it, Ben. I'm here for it. If we do a breakout team segment anytime soon, I might have them on here because I'm bought in, right? If I'm that
Yeah.
coach, if I'm Bo Baldwin, if I'm Kenny Dillingham, I go with Jaden Rashada. You got Southern Utah, Oklahoma State, and Fresno State to start off. I think those could be 3 wins. Oklahoma State, Fresno State, tough games, right? Fresno State is the Mountain West champion from last year. That's going to be a tough game. Oklahoma State, always solid. Then you got USC, Cal, and Colorado as your next 3 games. I think you drop USC for sure. Home against Colorado, that's a toss-up. We're going to see. I have to see how both teams are playing. You should beat Cal. Washington State are your next 2 games. I think you can beat the Cougars. I think Washington gets the best of them. Utah, UCLA, and Oregon are their next 3 games. Count those as losses. And then rivalry weekend, November 25th on that Saturday, they've got Arizona. So we'll see. I think you can put together 5 or 6 wins there. If they really come out and they're really competitive, maybe you get a win over a team like Utah, like UCLA. Maybe you go out and win 8 games if Jaden Rashada is really on. Unfortunately, they lose star running back Xavier Valade to the NFL draft as an undrafted free agent, but that's the best case. Worst case scenario is Coach Dillingham is in way over his head. The Sun Devils look really bad this season. They seem to look sloppy. Fans and media are calling for Kenny Dillingham's job after a bad season. Tons of transfers. You see a ton of mass exodus. Rashada seems to be in a bad spot. Sun Devils continue a rut on the gridiron. So kind of really just opposite ends of the spectrum. I could see it honestly going either way. This is just a huge toss-up in 2023 for Arizona State. I'm really excited for Kenny Dillingham. I think he's a great schematic coach. I think he did great things at both Florida State, Oregon, even some other spots as well. So I think they're set up for success, Ben. I'm excited. This is maybe your one check-in. He's doing a pretty good job. Trenton Bourguet looked pretty good in the spring game. I'm going to see. I'm excited. I think he could be the next big offensive head coach in college football.
No, I completely agree because, when I was looking at this team, I was like, thinking back to last year when we did that, where we pick a little side team, I was like, this is the kind of team I like,
Yeah,
So,
we were both agreeing on that one, yeah.
Yeah, so I like this team, and, their offense really does look exciting, and I'm excited to see what they do with this team, and I think the future for Arizona State is brighter.
It is. Ben, that'll wrap up our first-year head coach check-in. We've got 2 other big segments to get, not big segments, but pretty solid segments to get to here in episode 43. So let's roll right on, Ben. Any objections, any last takes on these first-year head coaches?
I'm all right.
Let's get to it. 2024 recruiting class. Man, is it a fun one. Man, is it fun. Ben, here's your trivia for episode 43. What Southern Boys Sports episode would it be without trivia? Name me the top 5 teams in the 2024 recruiting rankings per 24/7 right now.
Michigan.
1.
Ohio State.
2.
Georgia.
4.
Alabama.
18, so no.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Did I say Ohio State?
You did. There are 2. Michigan 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 4 is what you got. You got 2 and 5. 3 and 5, excuse me.
Is it Texas?
No.
No? Oh, no. I have 1, 2, and 4.
Yeah, you got 1, 2, 4.
It's not Bama.
It is 1, Michigan, 2, Ohio State,
Okay.
3 is LSU, 4 is Georgia, 5 is Penn State.
Hold on. Last one. Give me a minute. Give me the conference.
Oh, I literally just named them off. I guess you didn't hear me.
I didn't hear the last one. I said the last one. Give me.
Oh, Big Ten.
Penn State?
Yeah, Penn State.
Okay.
Penn State's in there at number 5. 6 is Notre Dame. 7 is Florida State. 8 is South Carolina. 9 is Oregon. And 10 is Tennessee. So, yeah. Other big names down the list. You got Florida at 16, Bama at 18, Oklahoma at 26, and Miami at 28. Again, when we talk about these rankings here, again, per 24/7, so credit to their list and that brand. But when we talk about these rankings, they can always vary, right? You'll always see a big up and down during the season. You got decommitments, transfers, all this stuff. So it's really early in the cycle. But hey, April. It's spring ball. We need some content, Ben. So we got to talk about the 2024 recruiting class. But let's start with you, Ben. I got a question for you to kick us off here in 2024 recruiting talk. We see OU down there at 26. Are you concerned about their spot, their lack of commits, anything with Brent Venables recruiting? Let's get your takes.
No, I'm not worried about it at all. The thing is, it's kind of getting to the point to where in these college in college right now, it's players are doing more recruiting than coaches. So somebody that I've been thinking about, David Stone. He is the most vocal person I've ever seen. He'll be like, "OU finally good to be back home," and then he's still thinking about MSU. So it's just things like that where the players, I've seen multiple people do it where they're like just they're the same high school teammates and they're like, just come join me back up and things like that. So
yeah,
I think once OU starts being like a few players, the other person will be like, yeah, it's time to commit, And so I know and I've heard a lot of people love OU and they feel like it's home. So I'm not really worried about it right now, and I think Venables is doing fine.
Yeah, like you said, David Stone, big guy. If you're watching on YouTube, he's right there in the middle in the IMG jersey. Just an absolute beast. I'm excited about him. Let's talk about the number one team in the class, though. Let's talk about Michigan. V's going to be listening. He's going to be happy we're talking about Michigan. So here you go, daily dose. Michigan's that number one team. Now, things can change. People will decommit. It's just bound to happen. I think Michigan will stay in that top 5. I think they got guys who are really committed to the program. Offensive linemen and tight end always stick around for Michigan. They're really used in the offense. And so I think you get a 4-star tight end and Brady Priestcorn, you got to stick around, right? You just saw Luke Schoonmaker get drafted. You see guys get used well in this Michigan offense in the spring game and will probably get used here in 2023. I think you got to stick around. 5-star QB Jaden Davis, 4-star offensive lineman Blake Frazier, and 4-star offensive lineman Andrew Sprague all stand out. So it is really fun to see what Michigan's got on their hands. You saw Taylor Lewan tweet out about it, saying they're going to win the national championship, something along those lines. And I think it's really not too far fetched, right? Number one class in 2024 as of right now. They've got some big commits. I think they're up to like 14 or 15 commits in the class, and that's a pretty big number for spring ball of the prior year. So I'm excited about Michigan. Ben, anybody stand out from this commit list, or anybody you want to talk about that Michigan's getting this spring or next spring?
I wouldn't say anyone specific, but I'd just say as a whole, this class it's very balanced, and I think that they are setting themselves up perfectly this year. I already feel like they do have a lot of depth this year, and this year I feel like they can make a national championship run. So the fact that they are still getting these classes and getting the depth in these classes is setting themselves up perfectly. So I think Michigan is doing a great job right now.
Yeah, I like what they're doing as well. I think they're going to be set up well this year with J.J. McCarthy and all that good stuff. But then you got a guy like Jaden Davis. You got a 4-star running back coming in as well. So all the replacements are coming together. Plus, you got the transfer portal, and they always do pretty well over there. So we will see what Michigan can do. Let's get to the number one player in the 2024 class. That's Dylan Raiola. He's got a Georgia crystal ball right now, right? According to 24/7, he's leaning toward UGA, Nebraska, Oregon, and USC. I know he's got family that went to Nebraska. A lot of people are talking about he's going to be able to blaze his own trail if he's a Cornhusker, goes to play for Matt Rule, kind of a program on the up and up, and he may be able to, get a lot of snaps there. But if he goes to Georgia, he's going on Kirby Smart, win some natties. If he goes to USC, you go to a quarterback whisperer in Lincoln Riley, a guy that just produced yet another Heisman winner in Caleb Williams, and a team that's always pretty much in contention. So, Ben, I want to get your take on Dylan Raiola. I really like what I see out of the kid. Obviously, he's the number one player in the class. There's not much more to say about him except he's absolutely phenomenal. But 2 Pac-12 teams, a couple other schools in there as well. Like I said, Georgia crystal ball as of now. Your take on Dylan Raiola and his recruitment?
I mean, I think he's a great player, but his recruitment in terms of things, it's kind of weird. He's got USC closer to home. He's got Ohio State, or he's got Nebraska, which is home for his family. So I feel as though, and he's got Georgia, who I don't really know who want to go to Georgia right now. So his recruiting his recruiting terms, they're very interesting. In terms like for me, I don't see why anyone would not want to head to Georgia right now. Quarterback room kind of shaky. I think he would be set up perfectly in their offense. And anyone who can get to play under Kirby Smart and really have that defense there that is fully backing you up with very little pressure as a quarterback, I feel like that's an absolute beauty. So I definitely could see why he's leaning to Georgia, but there's certain forces pulling in for all the teams in the running right now.
Yeah. Ben, last question here on the 2024 class, and then we will get to our portal whirlwind, our final segment here in episode 43. Player you are most excited to see pan out. The player in this 2024 class you're excited to see get here, you wish he was here on campus, could start producing now. You're going to be watching for him when he gets on campus next spring. I'll start, and I'll go with a rival of Tennessee. If you couldn't tell, Tennessee shirt, whatever. I'm a Tennessee fan. I'm going to go with the Florida commit, DJ Lagway, a 5-star quarterback per 24/7's composite rankings, which I always look at because it includes other media sites. You got On3s in there, ESPN's, all really good stuff, as well as 24/7. So I like to look at that, but he's a 5-star per composite rankings. He's 6'2", 225, and he's coming from Texas high school football. That's always a good sign, right? You see guys like Jackson Arnold, Kyler Murray, all these guys, and much, much, much more succeed at the quarterback position when coming from Texas. He's coming from Willis. He's a 21st player. My God, 21st player in the class as of right now. And he's a number 3 quarterback behind Julian Sayin and aforementioned Dillian Raiola. Number 5 player in Texas. And, dude, he's something else, right? He's something else. I'll read you what Gabe Brooks' comparison of 24/7. Yeah, no. Gabe Brooks of 24/7. He compared him to Hendon Hooker. So I'm already a fan of this DJ Lagway kid. I watched a little bit of him. He can sling the ball, dude. He's got an unbelievable arm. He's really able to hit those intermediate routes from what I saw. He gets the ball out quick for a 17-year-old. Like the way he gets the ball out, goes through his reads. Obviously, it's high school ball, but you're playing against high-level athletes in Texas. He's able to get the ball out. He looks pretty poised in the pocket as well. So he's shown to use his legs. He committed to play football and baseball. He's a 3-sport athlete. He also plays high school basketball. So, yeah, athletic ability is there. The ability for him to get out, use his legs, make a throw down the field or hit a corner route or get out and run for a 50-yard touchdown. It's all there. He's a really, really balanced and fundamental quarterback that I'm excited to watch at Florida. This kid's going to be a dog, and I'm excited to see him on campus next spring. Unfortunately, got to wait a year for him, but I'm really excited for him to be really good at Florida. Could be the next big thing in the SEC, and he could cure quarterback problems at Florida right when he gets on campus. Excited about the kid and the opportunity he'll get at Florida, going right into the right situation as long as Billy Napier and all those guys stick around. So, if you couldn't tell, really high on this DJ Lagway character, Ben.
Yeah. For me, I was kind of thinking about things, and I'm gonna go with Sammy Brown, a linebacker from Georgia. I've just seen so many things about him because he's like the greatest wrestler in Georgia history. I mean, he's like a do-it-all kid, and I think he's super exciting to watch. Just crystal ball to Georgia right now. I mean, I feel like a linebacker like that on Georgia. There's nothing else I'd rather watch. So I think it'd be very cool to see him pan out in that Kirby Smart defense. So I'm excited to see how he progresses. And I think he could be a very great player in the NFL at some point.
Yeah. Well, that will sum it up for our second segment of the night. Let's get to our third and final segment, I should say. This one's going to be interesting. We got a transfer portal discussions, and then we'll wrap it up. Try and keep it a little bit inside, that hour 20 mark, hour 30 mark, whatever. If you're still listening, thank you. Jam-packed episode today, so we appreciate you sticking around. But, Ben, biggest news in the portal has been these QBs. Tyler Buckner just committed to Alabama. Casey Thompson hopped in the portal after the spring game at Nebraska. He visited Auburn. And today, Sunday, April 30th, Peyton Thorne entered the transfer portal for Michigan State. So a lot of things going down, a lot of names to talk about, Ben, in the transfer portal. I know he's not a huge name, but former Lipscomb Academy quarterback who committed to Cincinnati, Luther Nickinson entered the transfer portal. So a name to watch out for. There. He was a 3-star out of high school. Pretty cool guy. So, Yeah. But big three names, they're up on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. Casey Thompson, Peyton Thorne, Tyler Buckner. Ben, let's start with Tyler Buckner's commitment to Alabama. One of the bigger news headlines of this spring. Your thoughts, man, your thoughts.
And it's an interesting one, but it's something that strategically I love because there's not many times a quarterback could commit to Alabama and be up for the starting job.
Yeah.
But he is. And so it's the right time to do it, and I think it was smart to get to play on that Alabama team. I think it worked. It could pan out perfectly for him because he is good. He is a good enough quarterback to take the job over Milroe or Simpson. So I think it is a great add to that Alabama QB battle, and I think it'll be definitely something to look out for.
Yeah, I mean, Tommy Rees was his offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. Obviously, he moved over to Alabama, so he got the opportunity to kind of get in Tyler Buckner's ear, will him over to Alabama as he's now the OC with Nick Saban. So I'm excited for that. I think Tyler Buckner's in the right position. I think he played his cards pretty much perfectly. Before his commitment, he said, no one's reaching out to me. I'm going to reach out to you if I'm interested. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Visited Alabama, committed to Alabama. He seems like he's in. So it's going to be a three-way battle, maybe four if you include Dylan Lonergan in there with Milroe and Simpson. So definitely a storyline to watch out for the rest of the summer, the fall, whisperings from that quarterback room and Nick Saban and stuff like that. So Tyler Buckner, name to watch out for. Casey Thompson, Peyton Thorne, two guys that, Southern Boy Sports posted on Twitter, two guys that could land in the SEC and be a produce now quarterback in the SEC, right? Talking about a team like Florida, who's still a little bit shaky with Graham Mertz and, and their freshmen over there. You're talking about a guy in Casey Thompson who visited Auburn, could be an Auburn Tiger. A lot of landing spots for these guys. I'd like to see them land in the SEC. Although there's definitely a group of five opportunities out there. Talking about a team like Georgia Tech, who I continue to bring up, who's going to need a quarterback, all that good stuff. And maybe you go in, you're going to have to play now. A guy like Ben Bryant also, who just transferred from Cincinnati. So all that stuff is definitely, on the table. I'd like to hear some landing spots for those three guys. Ben, if you got any, just some teams you'd like to see pick up a transfer quarterback.
I mean, obviously we have Auburn up there, and Auburn's a team that they don't, in terms of needing a quarterback, they don't need it. But I think it's something that they would be a nice add to that battle in there and a different vision for that team. And I think that these guys, they're guys who were maybe backups or couldn't really find it at their team. So they're just looking to play football. And they're looking to up their draft stock. So mainly really going in there and getting the job for sure. So sometimes some of these quarterbacks might not want to go to a team like in Auburn, where it's a potential QB battle and potentially you lose a job. You have to re-enter the transfer portal, and then it's just more problems. So they're really looking for a certified job, in my opinion, and I hope these guys can find it.
Yeah. Obviously, Colorado lost 50-plus players. You're talking about a four-star in Juwan Johnson, key wide receiver, Montana Lamonius Craig, and others. They've picked up 34 transfers, though. According to Deion Sanders, they're just getting more furniture, and they're obviously a top portal class this season. So we'll see. Really the hottest position in the portal right now, though, Ben, is the wide receivers. Montana Lamonius Craig from Colorado, Jordan Tyson from Colorado. Talking about a Jordan Hudson from TCU, who's a pretty good, production on that national championship appearance team. He's crystal balled to SMU. Dominic Blaylock from Georgia, Michael Pittman from FSU, AJ Henning from Michigan, Xavier Henderson from Florida. All these wide receivers could be produced now wide receivers at any school. You want to talk about a team that could really use a wide receiver is Auburn right now. They're in need for a wide receiver.
They need everything.
They just go to Auburn if you want to produce now at the wide receiver spot. Certainly, a couple of defenders could land at Auburn as well. So we'll see. I think if you go to a team like a Florida, you could get some produce time now, especially with Xavier Henderson entering the transfer portal. Bo Nix could use some weapons over at Florida with Dante Thornton entering the transfer portal. a lot of opportunities are open. I mean, there's 130 FBS teams, so somebody will find home. I think the hottest position right now is wide receiver. Definitely something to keep an eye on as we continue to transfer whirlwind. And the last specific name I want to talk about here on episode 43, the last thing we'll touch on is Bear Alexander. His commitment to USC. He's going to help Alex Grinch. He's going to help out that defense. 2022 stats didn't tell the whole story. Only had 5 solo tackles and 2 sacks, although one was in the national championship game. He's a huge, huge guy, 6'3", 305. Saw the field and will get some significant PT as a Trojan this season. Ben, your thoughts on Bear Alexander?
Yeah, I mean, this guy, he's a monster. 6'3", 320. And he's just built for a defensive lineman. You know, he was a freshman last year, going into a USC program that they need defense. It's something that they would really like, and he really, him transferring to USC is setting himself up to earn that starting job and to produce on a high level. So I think it was a good move for him. You know, I wish he wouldn't have gone to USC, but I it's a good move for him, and so I think I'm looking forward to watching this kid play.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you think about when he'll be in the draft, it'll be like 2025, 2026 before he's eligible, but he should be a stud. I mean, he's going to be one of those guys who's well talked about when he's in the Big 12, or excuse me, Pac-12, when he gets to the Big 10. He's going to be a household name at USC. I don't really have a hard time believing that. My dad was out in LA. He was doing some stuff out in Los Angeles, and he ran into Bear Alexander in the hotel. He was going to his visit at USC. This is obviously not this week, but it was, I want to say, either last week or the week before. So we ran into Bear Alexander and his mom, said they were nice people. So shout out to Bear Alexander. The odds you're listening are low, but if you are, you know, what's up? Nothing much else, Ben. Bear Alexander is a dog. A lot of transfer QBs to keep an eye on. We'll definitely touch on that once they commit in episode 44. I fully believe that. But hey, we brought episode 43 to you just a little bit earlier. If you're listening or watching, make sure to follow our socials at so_boy_sports on Twitter, at southern_boy_sports pod on Instagram. Use code SBS15 at universitytraditions.biz and, continue to support the brand. Really want to get to 100 followers over on Instagram. So if you're not following on Instagram, go follow on Instagram. Something we've been working toward for a while, and I think it's gone from 94 to 90. So go follow us over there. Yeah, so go follow us over there. Some interactive polls and stuff on the story. Some stuff to check out post-wise as well. And you'll get notified when there's a new episode. If you follow over there, it'll come up on your feed. So make sure to go do all that. And code SBS15 at University Traditions. Ben, any objections? We got a jam-packed show today. A lot of stuff to touch on. We had, first-year head coach check-in. We had 2024 transfer portal class talks. And, recruiting class talks and transfer portal class talks. Productive episode, to say the least, Ben.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to get into this new spring practice zone and see how the spring transfer portal works.
Yeah. Well, today was the last day to enter the spring transfer portal, so you saw a pretty mass exodus today on Sunday. If you're listening to it either Monday or Tuesday, whenever this episode comes out, the portal's closed. So you'll see, so commitments, visits, some big news like that. But we've kept it under an hour 15, hour 20, which was the goal. This has been the 42nd episode of the Southern Boys Sports Podcast. This has been the 43rd episode of the Southern Boys Sports Podcast. Make sure to leave it a like and subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review. Do all that good stuff. And come back, same time, same place, next week. See you, boys.